Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're still with us. Our guest is Donna Lowe. She is a candidate for the California State Assembly in a district that runs through portions of Los Angeles County and San Bernardino County. We congratulate you on landing in the top 2 in your district.
Thank you.
I want to talk about you to start, introduce you to our viewers. Tell us about yourself.
So I'm from Texas, and so I like to call it, I'm doing the reverse commute.
Some would argue.
So as some are mass exiting California to Texas, I came here in 1995, interested in computers and the technology market.
Right.
And got into some great companies, and now I'm currently with SafeNet, which is a $500 million company based on the East Coast, and I do data encryption and control. And
so why would you want to become an elected official?
So either I'm certifiably insane, or I think that I can make a difference, and I really think it's the latter. I think my 2 children, being as young as they are, really drive me to do this.
I want to talk about Texas, because Texas is seen as the poster child of what California should become.
What we used to be.
Well, and at least in some areas. There's no doubt that Texas has advantages, California has advantages, but on the issue of regulation, that is where I think there is near uniform agreement that we need a fix. I mean, even Governor Brown has said that we have too many damn regulations in California.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that issue and why you believe, should you be elected, that will become one of your monikers.
So I loved when Brown said we can't legislate to every human need. And he was absolutely correct. And what we try and do here in California is we create all of these regulation organizations. It makes it virtually impossible for companies to come here and start up, because initially when they're starting up, they're already in the hole. They don't know how to navigate the different regulations. You have the AQMD, you have the EPA, you have CEQA, you've got all of these fingers in your business, and all you want to do is find a place of business, hire employees, and start making jobs.
But it would seem to me, when you have the governor saying, we have too many damn regulations, he's a Democrat.
Yeah.
You have fellow Democrats saying the same thing. You have Republicans who've been saying that for decades.
Yeah.
What's the delay?
I think it's the very overzealous environmentalists in our state, and that really dictates policy. There's a few things up in Sacramento that you can't touch. You can't touch the environment, you can't touch labor unions, and these things have got to be reined in control, or brought some control to them.
Let's talk about environmentalism, because, you know, on the one hand, we love our coasts, we love our clean air.
Of course.
And so, you know, in some ways, California's a bit schizophrenic. They'll say we want less regulation, but for example, when there was an opportunity to delay the implementation of the California Global Warming Act, 61% said no. Right. So there is kind of a schizophrenia on this issue.
Well, I think too, with AB 32, with what you're talking about, what happens in the state legislature is someone comes up with a great idea, puts it into a bill, and it sounds good on paper, but then implementing it, the author of the bill oftentimes aren't even in the Capitol when it comes down to implementing it, and then liberties are taken.
Well, it goes to the regulatory agencies.
It goes to regulatory agencies, which then gets just overburdens the bill.
California is so unique in its schizophrenic ways. I mean, you know, voters say we have too many regulations. You have a chance to decrease regulations as it relates to global warming. 61% say no.
Yeah.
So it becomes that challenge. I will say this, though, on the question of pensions, Californians do seem to be speaking with one voice.
Absolutely.
As you surely know, there was a primary. There was a primary in June, and 2 cities voted on whether they should reform their pensions. San Jose, not a particularly conservative city, voted over 65% in favor of pension reform. San Diego, a more moderate city, over 65%. There have been 20 elections on pension reform in the last few years. 18 have voted yes. The 2 that voted no, San Francisco twice. Californians are speaking with one voice on pension reform. The governor has submitted a 12-point pension plan. The Republicans adopted that 12-point pension plan. Are we going to see pension reform done low?
I hope so. Let's hope so, because if not, coupled with the anti-business climate, California will be bankrupt. There will be no California. So all of the beautiful beaches that we have, great.
So let's talk about pension reform, because I think, you know, it's hard to grasp if you're not a public worker. It can be, you know, ephemeral.
Right.
explain to us why we need, in your view, pension reform. What's the challenge?
Well, I think that the pensions that are being paid out are far more lucrative than you even make in the private sector. I think there's a lot of pension abuse, spiking,
airtime,
all of these things coupled together, and that you've got to cut them out. It's got to be a level playing field across the board with private and public sector work.
Well, right now, though, and it's a great issue to discuss. Right now, well, let me back up. I think it's fair to say that in the past, public workers made less than private workers for similar jobs, but they made up the difference through benefits.
Right.
It's not clear if there's parity on pure compensation.
Right.
But we do know is that the private sector is pulling back on pension benefits, and the public sector is still grappling
going full
with
bore.
it. But how do you create a scenario whereby I mean, look, they are doing our work,
right?
Where you still honor their work and you don't chase them, because we need fine public sector workers.
Of course,
right?
We need DMV.
Right.
I mean, that's a state mandated,
right.
Or actually federal mandated. We need the public works. But we also need something that's sustainable. And right now what we have is not sustainable. So when you have people who are working until they're 50 years old, retiring at an ungodly amount on their pension, and then go work in the private sector, it is hard, it's hard to justify.
And what's so interesting about this issue is when you deal with our public safety officials, because they are doing such important work for us, and it is those unions that are fighting the hardest to protect pension benefits.
Right.
And conservatives, liberals, it doesn't matter. We love our officers.
We love our officers.
And
we absolutely love our officers.
Wow, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one, but I think also if you get to where we're spending money elsewhere in the state and what's being taken from public safety, what's being taken from education, I think it's a big lie that we're being fed right now regarding, the only two departments that we can cut are public safety and education. I know for a fact there's 520 agencies up in Sacramento that the state funds. Do we need all 520 of those agencies? What are they all doing?
And what's so interesting is Democrats say the same thing. So why don't we see movement on this?
And I don't know if it's just this partisan line, because I know some Democrats who have come to the Republican assemblymen and we wish we could vote for this, but we're being told not to.
So let's talk about the partisan line, because look, if you are successful, it is highly likely you're joining a minority in Sacramento in terms of the party. So if you want anything passed, you're going to have to work with the Democrats.
Right.
How do you plan on working across the aisle?
Well, I think we have to bury the hatchet. I mean, everyone has to come to a consensus that we have to bury the hatchet. We do it every day in private sector. You have to suck it up, right? Well, I think that both sides, the Republicans have shown that they were willing to, with some recent teacher
pension reform,
the pension reform, as well as the teacher misconduct reform, and the Democrats chose to say, no, we're not going to vote for it. But I know that there were some Democrats in there that wanted to vote for it desperately, but were told you cannot do so.
Now, the flip side, and all sides have their demons,
right,
is this, no new tax pledge. I think you didn't sign it. Did I read that in the LA Times? Grover Norquist requires everyone to sign, all Republicans to sign a no new tax pledge.
Right.
I mean, have you decided whether you're going to sign something like that?
So what I will tell you is that I do not support the tax increases on the November ballot.
Right.
I do not think that there are meaningful spending cuts in this tax increase. And frankly, I think along with the rest of the California citizens, are so tired of bearing the brunt of our budget. So 10 years ago, or 1960, the budget was completely flip-flopped. 10% came from, 10% came from us, the taxpayers, and 60% came from business taxes that came into the. Now it's the complete different. 60% comes from us, the taxpayers, and 10% is.
Do a lot of tax reform.
So there's tax for that's definitely.
You'll be back, right?
Absolutely.
Her name is Donna Lowe.
Absolutely.
She is running for the California City Assembly on Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Sniff, he is the sheriff for Riverside County. And wow, when we spoke last year, you were in real dire straits as it relates to your fiscal house. Things are much better this year. Why?
Well, I think it was a pretty ugly battle last year, and fortunately the board, and that was pretty much an issue with the former county executive office, and the cuts were just too big as I described at the time. The board ended up not supporting that. I did inherit a little bit of red ink at the start of this year with the agreement that we would not have any layoffs unless I couldn't get past that red ink. We erased that red ink and actually ended up with a surplus.
You're being humble. You had a deficit of $5.5 million.
Right.
It swung the other way. You now have a surplus of $6 million.
Right. And
that's an $11 million swing.
Exactly. And we did a good job of cinching down everywhere we could. We've had a heavy toll, though, in attrition in the unincorporated areas, and that was part of that agreement to take down the staff levels down that. Nobody wanted to do it, but just economics within the county drove that.
And let's talk about the unincorporated areas. When we think about the Inland Empire and the two counties within the Inland Empire, these are huge geographic areas, and many of the areas are unincorporated. And as a result, in Riverside County, for example, you police those areas. But what we have seen is that you, like you said, you have had real drops in those areas. I think the goal is you want 1 per 1,000 citizens, residents, and you were down to 0.9 per 1,000 residents.
Right, and we're actually going to continue to drop because the target that we agreed to with the board was to go down to 0.75. And for the public, basically that means for the 10 patrol stations, only 2 deputies on at any given time of the day for sometimes hundreds of square miles. So it's quite a drop from what it was a couple of years ago when we were at 1.2 per thousand, and it dropped down to 1.0 per thousand. The good news is that surplus that you mentioned, the board is having me reinvest it, and we're going to begin beefing back up the unincorporated area by hiring more deputies. It'll still take us about 12 to 18 months to dig ourselves out, but we need to do that. Our response times have greatly increased. We've seen crime patterns pop out.
And let's talk about that, because when we look at violent and property crimes in those areas, the numbers have been dropping since 2008, but then in 2011, you saw a spike above that 2008 level.
Right, and some of the areas are still dropping, but we've had some hot spots, particularly out in the Coachella Valley, the Hemet-San Jacinto Valley, and the other areas have seen a checkering of some types of crimes on the increase. The big drops we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years on crime in Riverside County anyway seem to be bottoming out. And the economy is taking its toll. The foreclosures and just the general circumstances economically now are causing a lot of issues.
Sir, in the next portion of our program, we're going to be speaking with 3 of your, I'll call them employees. One's a deputy, one's a corporal, and one is a manager. And they are coming on to speak about the fact that the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is hiring close to 500 people.
Right.
That is a wonderful number and remarkable that you're able to do that. Is that part of this plan that you've just described?
Yeah, it is part of it. Part of that is the normal attrition that we have through retirements and other losses. We still have to regain those positions and hire new people to replace as other folks retire and move on. But the bigger issue is some of that will be the 50 deputies that we'll be going after for the unincorporated area. The far bigger issue for Riverside County, and you've heard me talk about it, is jail overcrowding. We are going to expand jails massively.
And one of the people we speak with is a correctional corporal who's now working in training. And I understand you're hiring, is it 200 correctional corporals, is that right?
Well, correctional deputies.
Deputies, whatever the term may be, yes. So that's, you know, and that's 200 people. Yep. 250 deputy sheriffs, and I think maybe 30 or so in 911.
Right. What our job classifications that are open right now for hiring, and I hope good people apply for it and the word gets out, will not only be civilians, because we're going to continue to hire civilians, correctional deputies, and sworn deputy sheriffs, those that have peace officer powers.
I do want to talk about the deputy sheriffs. I know that relations have been pretty rocky between the county and the sheriff's union. Last May, meaning 2011, the county declared an impasse.
Right.
But the great news is, as I understand it, in June, the parties finally came to an agreement.
Yes.
And so I have to think that that is good news for the head sheriff.
Well, I think it's good news for all of us in government because we don't need a lot of dissension. And the really good silver lining to that is the board was able to execute agreements with not only Riverside Sheriff's Deputy Union, RSA, but the union of managers above them, and also 2 civilian groups, and they did it for multi-years. So that smooths things out for probably 3 to 4 years across the board with our labor groups.
And I know one of the biggest challenges between the county and the union was the question of pensions. I mean, we have spoken on this program countless times about pension reform, and while there was some bona fide pension reform as part of the plan, it seems as if both sides can write home and say, we compromised and there are still strong benefits, but in such a way that it's not going to bankrupt the county.
Right, and I think in the near term that will serve us pretty well. In the long term, we do get some tremendous savings. Probably the viewers need to understand, though, that there's 2 different groups that are involved when you talk about pension overhaul. And all of us in leadership positions know that we need to reform the pension system. It's unsustainable at this rate. However, the bulk of employees in the government in California are in the one called miscellaneous, which are civilians. There's only a very small group that are actually in the peace officer or public safety one.
I want to talk to you about what we know as realignment. We have been speaking about that for quite some time, and that's the plan whereby lower level offenders, the 3 nons, are not serving their time in state prisons but county jails. I know it's put, I understand it's put a burden on all 58 counties. The governor has proposed a tax initiative this coming fall that would guarantee funding to counties to put in place the prison realignment scheme. Have you taken a position on that initiative? I know, for example, I believe the DA in San Bernardino County has taken a yes position on that. I'm not sure about Riverside County. Have you come out?
I have. In fact, all 58 sheriffs, the Statewide Sheriffs Association has taken out a position of support of the governor on that. If we are not guaranteed funding on those realignment tasks that each of our counties got handed, basically an underfunded mandate, we're all in very deep fiscal trouble.
That says a lot. It really says a lot that all 58 sheriffs have come out in favor of the governor's plan. What made you take this step as an organization? Because
the legislature has been very flighty, and it just takes one fickle change from year to next, and suddenly we lose a tremendous amount of money that was sent down by the state this last year and this coming year. That's just part of the annual budget to deal with those additional tasks that each of our counties got. If that's not guaranteed, many of our counties, many of our cities right now are on the fiscal ropes. That really kicks us over the edge.
Are you going to take an active role? Is the association going to take an active role? Because, look, I mean, as someone who just watches the process, if sheriffs come out and say, we support the governor's initiative, that could help.
Well, and we all understand that. But the first step is the State Sheriff's Association. They did that earlier this calendar year and came out very strongly on behalf of supporting the governor. All of us were with him on a conference call at one point talking about the pros and cons. Nobody likes any type of additional tax issue going before any of us as taxpayers. All of us recognize the dire straits that our school systems are in, which are critical for long-range infrastructure growth of all of our communities. But the criticality of these criminal justice systems that have been burdened with additional state mandates right now, it is absolutely critical that we get guaranteed, constitutionally guaranteed funding.
You think the voters are ready? I
don't know, and I think there's so many things going on, and the counties, the cities, and certainly the state have been in such dire straits. I think it's iffy. But some of us are responsible for standing up and saying and doing the right thing.
Will you stand up?
I think we are. I am too.
But throughout November, will you be going to the voters and saying?
I already am.
You are. And what are they saying?
There's a lot of skepticism about whether the money will use as it's promised, and that's normal, particularly in these circumstances we've been facing the last few years. Government's not always had the most credible use of a lot of those funds. And the bait and switch that many of us have seen for the last 15 or 20 years still haunts myself too.
His name is Stan Sniff. He is Riverside County Sheriff. When we come back, we'll be speaking with 3 of Mr. Sniff's employees about employee recruitment at the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you for joining us. I have some great news. There is an organization that is hiring and hiring a lot of folks. In fact, 250 positions throughout the county of Riverside, and you will be doing work that will be so important to this county, to this region, that you will go to bed at night feeling good about yourself. Yes, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is hiring, even during these very tough fiscal times. Its Sheriff Sniff has been fighting to hire more deputies, more officers for years, and it's finally going to happen. And I congratulate all of you on the work you've been doing for the department for many years. And I want to start with you. Let me introduce first. This is Heather Wood. She is a communications manager at the Riverside Sheriff's Department, focusing on 911. This is Kevin, say it. Gamendi. He is a correctional corporal. He's now working in the training center. And this is Victor Pearson. He's a deputy sheriff working in Moreno Valley. But I want to start with you, Kevin Gamendi, to talk about the scope of hiring for Riverside County Sheriff's Department.
Okay, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department is actually hiring, active recruiting. We're looking at hiring 250 deputy sheriffs, about 200 correctional deputies, and about 35 dispatchers.
Oh, so it's not just 250, it's almost 500 people.
Yes.
So it's even better than what I said. So it's 250 sheriffs, 200 correctional deputies, and
35 dispatchers.
That's remarkable. I mean, in these times when unemployment is so high, and especially in the Inland Empire, to think that you could land a high, I mean, it's fairly high paying with excellent benefits and serving your community, I mean, sign me up. So tell me more.
Well, we're looking at, there's a whole process in the hiring. There's a written test and physical agility. That's for deputy sheriff of corrections.
Right.
And
I'd fail, but continue.
The first thing to start off with, you can visit our website, which is www.joinrsd.org, or you can contact one of our recruiters, which is.
And what are the basic requirements for any position in the Riverside County Sheriff's Department?
Well, each job varies.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So, yeah.
But do you need to be a high school graduate, for example?
You do have to have a high school diploma or equivalent.
GED would work.
Yes.
What about background? I mean, I got to ask if you were, kind of a rabble-rouser in high school. Is that okay?
Well, the department does do a very extensive background investigation. So it all depends on, there's a polygraph examination also, and, the written and all that.
Okay, so I want to start with each department and talk about the benefits of joining. Why don't we start with you, Heather Wood, you're the communications manager. You oversee, almost 125 dispatchers taking 911 calls. Such important work. Tell me about the positions in your department.
Well, most people realize that it's called the Sheriff's 911 Communications Officer, but we call them dispatchers.
Sure.
Most people realize that they take the 911 calls, and that's what they think the job is, but really it's much more than that. The dispatcher's primary goal is to get help where people need it in the county of Riverside, and that starts with our calls that come in. They come in on 911, our non-emergency lines. We process 1.8 million calls a year in and out of our centers. It's very busy. They get the information from the callers and pass it up to our radio dispatchers, which is the second part of the position.
Oh, so there are two...
It's really, they do everything.
So are you looking for the 911 intake or also...
It's one position.
Oh, I see.
The 911 Sheriff's Communications Officer, it's one position. They just do both jobs.
I understand.
And the dispatchers on the radio then communicate with our deputies who are out in the field, keeping track of them, sending them to the calls, and keeping them safe and getting them their help.
I have to tell you, I have called 911 before, and it has been such a positive experience. The individuals on the other end are so calming.
Yes, and that's their job.
It is unbelievable how it's such a critical role. They don't get flustered, and it's so critical. Let's turn to you, Victor Pearson. You are a deputy sheriff.
Yes.
You're what we think of when we think of a cop. Not that you're not cops, but you are, on the ground. Tell me about what you're looking for in your department, the deputy sheriffs.
Well, we're currently looking to hire 250 sworn deputy sheriffs. The benefits are awesome.
Yes.
You have a full retirement, plus you have full benefits.
Right. But more importantly, what is the job like day in and day out? I got to say, let me digress for a second. Before 911, I felt like the relationship between citizens and officers were just not that strong. Ever since 911, I feel like it's a different world. Easy for me to say I'm not a cop, but do you get that sense?
Yeah.
Kind of what brings it all together.
Right.
Yeah, we're kind of the middle link between getting you, the deputy sheriffs, out in the field. Yeah.
But I really feel like we're back where we should be, that we are honoring our officers. So tell me about your day in and day out.
Every day is different.
Of course.
Every day, every call is different. Every call I'm sure that our dispatchers receive is different. And every day in the jail, I'm sure, is different as well
Right.
for correctional deputies. But for deputy sheriffs, every single call is different.
And what drew you to this profession? I mean, it really takes a certain type of person. I think there are a lot of people who are watching now could be that person, but what was it?
Well, I grew up in Riverside County, so for me it was I actually wanted to make a difference in the community that I grew up in and give back.
And you are.
Yes.
In a very significant way. Okay, let's go to Kevin Gamendi, who is a correctional corporal.
Yes.
Wow, I mean, I honor you on so many levels. You are in the jails,
Yes,
and
I
that can be so incredibly challenging. You have so many people in there for so many different reasons. We know that there is a prison overcrowding crisis on the state level. You are on the county level, but you are now taking more prisoners because of what we know as realignment. I needn't get involved in that complicated subject. But that being said, talk to me about your job, your day in and day out, when you were in the prisons. I know you're training now, but...
Okay. Well, on an average, we house about 3,800 inmates between 5 facilities. Now, our facilities are located throughout Riverside County. We have one in Riverside, City of Riverside, one in the City of Marietta, one in the city of Banning, one in the city of Indio, and one in the city of Blythe. So our daily, we have to transport inmates to and from courts. We have a transportation unit. We have a gang unit. We also have a classification unit. We work courts, and we also have correctional deputies assigned to the training center and so on.
But talk to me about being in those jails. I mean, this is a job you really need to think about. It's one that I got to think a lot of benefits, but real challenges as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, it's challenging dealing with inmates. I mean, on an average daily basis, you don't know what's going to happen. You know, inmates' attitudes. If you treat them fair and you give them the respect, you'll get that in return.
Now, am I right? I'm not really sure about this. When you apply to be in the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, do you automatically start in the prisons?
No, you don't. Some do.
Right. I think in
and some
LA
go under
County they
patrol.
do that, but not in Riverside County.
Yeah.
So do you select, I want to be a correctional deputy, I want to be a deputy sheriff, I want to be a dispatcher?
You can.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the process, because you gave us a little bit about it, but look, I'm sure that because people are watching today, they will want to apply. How's the process? What is it like to actually go through that application?
Each of the classifications is slightly different.
Right.
All the information, though, again, it's at our website that Kevin gave you a minute ago, www.joinrsd.org. That has all the information for each of the classifications. We also have recruiters they can call at 1-888-JOIN-RSD to get started. We each have a different testing process, but we all have a background process to go through that's very similar.
Right. What about training, though? I have to think you would have training programs. I know if you had been in the military, this might be a nice fit, but if you don't have a military background, you know, and you weren't a student ranger or whatever they may be called, what kind of training do you offer?
Well, it's not really needed. There's no training needed for this job. The Sheriff's Department actually provides everything you need.
So what if you are selected, you will be trained?
Yes.
Tell me about the training process.
Well, for each classification, it is different. For deputy sheriff, once you make it through the background process and you are hired, you go to the Ben Clark Training Center, where you will endure a 24-week training academy.
Is it enduring?
Yes.
It's a challenge.
Absolutely.
But it's a challenge that one can rise to.
Oh, most definitely.
What about in your division?
Well, the corrections division, we have a 9-week academy, which is 373 hours, what exceeds a state recommended hours. So it's a state recognized academy. It's very extensive. We cover a lot of different things.
And yours, I got to think a lot of psychological training needed.
Our training is a year long.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
We have 2 different academies that you go to, one for phones, one for radio, and then everything else is done one-on-one with a trainer at the dispatch center. And the best thing about all of our training is it's all paid training. We pay everyone to go through and do this training.
And it doesn't matter where you live in the state of California. If you are watching, you can apply to be a deputy sheriff, a correctional corporal, a communications executive, whatever it may be called, manager. And I thank you so much. The website is joinrsd.org. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you for watching Charter California Edition.